I am Larry Hoy, biker writer legend, and this is the First Chapter podcast where I introduce you to some great books and give you their first chapter. Let's get started. All right, I'm taking you back in time this week. We have the Captain Hawking Adventures. This is a book series produced by Charles Millhouse. This goes in the genre of Indiana Jones. So an early pulpy fiction, adventure fiction type of thing. So sit back, relax, go get some popcorn. There you go. And let's get started with first chapter. Chapter 1, The Russian Invasion, November 1931. As Hardy and Oz entered the brownstone on Bleecker Street, it was in shambles. It looked as though burglars ransacked the home of Captain Stephen Hawklin. Chairs were toppled over, glasses shattered on the floor, clothes lay in discarded piles. If it weren't for the empty bottles of bourbon and wine sitting willy-nilly through the home, thieves would have been a good guess. Instead, the rich smell of alcohol and tobacco lingered on the air, which meant a party. This, however, was a party of one. Hardy and Oz didn't say much when they scoured the home. Both had seen the same thing on their minds. Where was Stephen Hawking? Stephen checked himself out of the hospital the day before yesterday, telling the doctors to go to hell. Unable to accept what happened with the Osiris project devastated Stephen, and Hardy feared he would do something stupid. So where do we go now? Oz asked. Hardy knelt to a picture that had fallen off the wall, picked it up and turned it over. It was a photograph of him and Stephen taken during the war. They looked so young and ready to save the world single-handedly. They were more than comrades, they were family, and Stephen's pain was Hardy's as well. Hardy? Placing the picture back on the wall, Hardy turned to Oz, his brow furrowed, and he said, I don't know. Could he have went to San Francisco to see his father? Oz asked. I doubt it, Hardy replied. Their relationship it's rocky at best, and the last thing Stephen would want to be for Thomas to think he was failure. Is that what he is? Hardy turned to Oz, sharpened his eyes on the small bulldog of a man, and said, What's that supposed to mean? Oz looked at his shoes. The fact is, we don't know what the hell happened with Osiris Project, not until Stephen tells us his side of the story. Until then, we do know what we set out to do. We find him. I thought you were his friend. Oz replied with a dagger stare. His jaw set tightly. I am his friend. The best way to help him is to find the reason behind his sudden disappearance. Clearly, he feels guilty of something, and he did on Osiris, and the best way to help him is to figure that out. I didn't mean. I know what you meant, Oz snapped back. The truth is, you've treated me like an outsider since I signed on with Stephen last year. I might not have known him as long as you or fought in the war beside him, but it doesn't make me less of a friend. I don't like it that you imply otherwise. Now it was Hardy's turn to look at his shoes. Oz, yeah, Oz said, raising his hand. I'm worried about him too. Oz straightened himself, crossed the room to face Hardy, and said, Where do we go now? Hardy checked his wristwatch. It was after 9 o'clock. There wasn't much more we can do tonight, he said. We've exhausted every avenue. We should go home and start fresh in the morning. Yeah, maybe you're right, Oz replied. The tension between them faded, but was still present. My contract at the police station will let me know if something turns up. Keeping it on the QT. Good. That'll be the last thing we want is for the press to get wind that Captain Harding is missing, Hardy said, understanding that there was enough gossip floating around about Stephen on the Osiris project. The night air was pleasant and calm when they stepped outside. There were some pedestrians on the street, but the traffic was light and the sky was clear. The street lamps provided ample light, but the dim shadows kept nooks and crannies of nearby buildings dark and ominous. "Where are you off to?" Hardy asked. "Home," Oz said, flashing a smile. "Miss Anderson frowns when the tenants come in the front door after 10 o'clock. Why don't you find a different place to live? Her rules are a little outlandish, wouldn't you say?" The old bird means well," Oz said. "Besides, once her bridge apartment's finished, I'll be staying there most of the time." Hardy agreed with a nod, but didn't say anything. He didn't want to bring up the fact that Stephen needed to be found first, and Hardy's thoughts froze when he focused on a woman across the street. But before his vision aligned, a large truck sped by, obscuring his view. "You all right, Hardy? You see someone?" Hardy went to the edge of the sidewalk and studied the area where he thought he saw. Nah, couldn't have been her, he thought. "It's nothing, Oz." Hardy did a double take just to make sure. "You sure?" Oz said, placing his fingers to his lips and whistling, waving at a passing taxi. The yellow cab pulled to a stop, and the driver yelled through the open window, "Where to, Mac?" Oz opened the back door, and before he climbed in, said, "I'll come by your apartment around 7. We'll get a fresh start." He slipped into the back seat and said, 18 Columbus Avenue, driver." Hardy watched the taxi turn the corner at the end of the block and disappear. Hardy closed the door of his apartment and clicked on the light. He dropped into a chair near the window and stared out at the Crown City skyline. In the distance, Hardy saw the top of a silver bridge over Hampton Bay. The construction of the bridge was complete, and the tower apartment at the top of the center suspension beam was nearly finished. Hardy checked the bridge apartment so many times in the past day with hopes of finding Stephen there, only to have them dashed by finding nothing but construction workers and their equipment. It wouldn't be much sleeping tonight, not until he knew Stephen was all right. For a long minute, Hardy worried that Stephen might take his guilt to the extreme. Whatever went wrong in Osiris had knocked Stephen a shattering blow. Stephen Hawklin wore his emotions on his sleeve most of the time, worried about everyone and everything besides himself. No man should take on that much worry, Hardy thought. He hoped Stephen would have left that all behind at the end of the war, but it only grew worse over the years. Stephen would have liked to help people, sometimes to his detriment. Hardy stood and crossed the room to pour himself a shot of scotch. He scooped the glass up in his hand and stared at it for a time. He cracked into a smile before swallowing the drink. Hardy was one of Stephen's little battles for the most part. It was worth fighting for. Stephen kept Hardy from slipping too far into the bottle. Hardy picked the bottle up and poured another drink, but paused and replaced the cap. He didn't need to make things worse. And a second drink would lead to another, and so on. Drunk, Hardy wouldn't do Stephen any good. A knock at the door caused Hardy to jump, slightly jarring him away from his thoughts. Hope rose in him, hoping it would be Stephen on the other side of the door. When Hardy opened it, however, it wasn't Stephen standing there, but... "Hola! Hola, Cosal!" Hardy said, astonished. "Thank God, Hardy!" Alla said in her thick Russian accent. "I need your help." Hardy's brow tightened in a faint breath. "Alla? It was you I saw across the street earlier tonight?" "I wanted to approach you, but waited for you to be alone," Alla said. "I wasn't sure I could be trusted. I wasn't sure he could be trusted." "Who, Oz?" Hardy asked. He might look disheveled, and he's a bit smelly, but he's a friend and someone you can trust. You could have... Wait, why would you need to be worried about Oz's trustworthiness?" Alla glanced up and down the hall, outside the door. Fretted, she asked, "Can I come in?" Hardy stepped outside to allow Alla into his apartment, softly closing the door. He locked the deadbolt. When he turned, she threw herself into his arms and buried her face in his chest. Her arms constricted around him. Hey, it's all right. You're safe." "Oh, Hardy, I'm so glad to have found you." Hardy's heart melted. Alla had a way of doing that to him. Stephen told him it was because of her Russian accent, but Hardy was sure it was her deep, rustic eyes. He broke Alla's hold on him and stepped back to get a better look at her. Alla Sokol stood just a little shorter than him. She was lovely, but not stunning. She wore a black dress with a high-neck collar and no makeup. Her large doe eyes were dimmer than he remembered, and he saw fear in them. Hardy led Alla to the sofa that sat opposite the chair and set her down. He ruffled for some ice from the ice bucket and at the end of the bar and clanked them into the glass. He filled it and took it to her. "Drink." She pushed it away. "You know It's water," Hardy assured her. Taking the glass in both hands, Alla took a long drink. Hardy sat across from her in his chair and studied her. He and Stephen met Alla 7 years ago, while traveling in Turkey during the Kurd uprising of 1925. 3 of them nearly didn't escape after the rebellion was crushed. "Better?" Harley asked. Alla placed the glass on the coffee table between them and nodded. "Good," Hardy said, sitting back in his chair. "You must be wondering what's going on," she said. "Well, the thought occurred to me," he said with a faint smile. "You're still working for the Minister of Science in Moscow?" he asked. Alla nodded. "And you're in trouble." "Please, Hardy," Alla said to him. "Hear me out. I didn't know who else to trust." "You must be in some trouble if you've come looking for somebody you haven't seen in 6 years," Hardy said. "I'm only here because those in my government don't want the secret to get out," Alla said. "They would do anything to keep it away, including killing everyone involved in the project." "Killing people?" "I'm the last one. The travesty dies with me." Harley's eyebrows rolled, and he said, "Why don't you start at the beginning?" Alla thinned her lips and regarded Harley for a long moment, as if she was afraid to tell him. He saw in her expression something he'd only seen in the faces of those who fought the front line of combat. Death and horror that they witnessed tarnished their souls. Their eyes mirrored their internal struggles. Alla held the same kind of repulsiveness in her eyes, as if she'd seen the horrors of death and mayhem, and few people could relate to. "I've been working on a project at a facility in Siberia for the last several years, near Lake Bakatol." "What kind of project?" Harley asked. Alla bit her lip. "Alla, I can't help you if you won't trust me enough to tell me the whole story." "I'm not a traitor to my country," Alla said. "Giving away secrets isn't something I'm accustomed to doing." "If you'd rather not tell me." If I don't," Alla said, "a lot more people are going to get killed." Hardy refused to push Alla into divulging anything more. It had to be something she was willing to do of her own accord. "I wish to hell Stephen was here. He's better at this than I am." Hardy drew a breath and said, "You can stay the night here. Maybe in the morning you'll be willing to—" "No," Alla snapped. "I have to tell you. I can't wait. I can't have the blood of more people on my hands without lifting a finger." Hardy didn't say another word. The blood drained from Alla's face, and with water welling in the bottoms of her eyes, she said, "Stalin is obsessed with improving and preserving the future of the Russian people. His idea of improving the human body by genetic engineering and altering our design to create superior beings in both mental and physical capabilities. He's fixated on designing the perfect soldier for a war he says will come in the next several years. The Soviet Union must be ready to fight." "But something went wrong, I take it," Hardy said. "Horribly wrong," Alla replied. "We created in the lab what can only be described as a monster, a creature so horrifying it's unbelievable." "And beyond my pay grade," Hardy replied, placing his hand to his jaw. His eyes went to the floor. "This is more of a Stevens expertise. At least he would understand the theory." "I never had a chance to tell him. He didn't want anything to do with me," Alla said. "That's why I came looking for you." Hardy's eyes rolled up to Alla, and his hand dropped from his face. "What did you say?" "I said that's when I came looking for you." "No, the first thing. You saw Stephen?" "I saw him yesterday. He wouldn't take the time to listen to me. Said he didn't care. Hardy went to his feet and loomed over Alla. Why didn't you tell me you saw Stephen? I thought you two might have had a falling out. Hardy shook his head. No. I've been looking at him for days before yesterday. He crossed the room, heading for the phone. He could have led with that, you know. How was I supposed to know? Hardy picked up the candlestick phone off the table and placed the receiver to his ear and asked, Where did you see him? I found him outside a garage, a place called Tupper's. Hardy frowned. You've heard of it? Alla asked. Hardy nodded. I know the place, he said. It was late when I found him. Hey, I never considered the time. Are many garages open after 10 o'clock here in America? Just the ones that have a very evasive clientele, Hardy said. How did you find him so easily? When Oz and I couldn't, Hardy thought. It's a long story, but Hardy threw up a hand, keeping Ella on the subject, and said, You found him at Tupper's, and... Alla moved a stray hair out of her eyes and continued. The peculiar thing was, Stephen didn't recognize me when I approached him. If I didn't know better, I would have bet he had been drinking. That's a bet I would take, Harley replied, hitting the rocker arm on the phone and said loudly to the receiver. Hello, operator. I need to call Columbus. 352. Yes, I'll hold. Alla crossed the room and said, I have a feeling I've come for help at the wrong time. The worst, Hardy said. Stephen has had some, setbacks. I shouldn't have come, Alla said. Hardy withdrew the receiver from his ear and studied Alla and said, No, this might be the perfect time. Stephen needs something to wrap his mind around, some problem to fix. Let's just hope it's not too late to pull him back from the edge. The edge of what? Alla asked. Oblivion. After being hired by Captain Hawklin, Oz moved into Mrs. Anderson's boarding house. Mrs. Anderson's place was the only one he looked at, apart from the fact that the home was immaculately clean and well kept and smelled of roses, even though there wasn't a rose in the house. It was in walking distance of the subway and a little burger joint he liked. He and Mrs. Anderson took to one another right off and thought of her more of a mother than a landlord, though from time to time she reminded him that she was in charge of the house. Gummit. All right, Charles. I love it. Absolutely getting the old Ford 1930s feel in this one. If you like the noir, old detective noir stuff, some Indiana Jones, boom, right there. Captain Hawklin. I'll put a link down in the bottom for Charles so you can find him. But drop him a text, let him know how much you like this, and I will see you next week. So that was our first chapter, and I am Larry Hoy, Biker Rider Legend. I invite you, make sure that you reach out and subscribe to the channel. Befriend me on Facebook. Use this name up at the top, Larry Hoy Author. Drop in there, and of course, go visit Amazon and grab my latest book, Demon's Kiss. It's the latest in the Hit World book series, and it is an action adventure that you're not going to be able to put down. And if you're an author and you'd like to get your book out here on First Chapter, please reach out to me. Drop me a line and let me know what you've got to share. I'll talk at you next week. Later.